How to know whether your acting technique is good enough. This is a great question. How do you know? How are you to judge your own technique? Isn't that the casting director's or the director's job? Well, there is a fairly simple way that you can actually look to see whether you are good on camera. And it involves recording yourself and harshly judging yourself. So let's chat about it. First thing that I want you to do is find some sort of material. You can go to a website like monologueblogger.com or just kind of search Google. You can find a monologue or some other scene if you have a reader. And what you want to do is actually perform the material. Now, I will say this. When it comes to a monologue versus a regular scene, I myself as a filmmaker typically have an easier time judging whether an actor is going to be good on camera if they're doing a scene with a reader, because you can easily tell how natural the pauses are and whether they're listening and really feeling the emotion or whether they're just kind of waiting for the other person to finish saying their line so that they can say their next line, right? So I would recommend picking a scene where another character is actually speaking to you and getting a friend to read. But if you can't do that, it's totally fine to do a monologue. Now make sure to pick something that fits within your brand. And what you're going to do is you're going to find either, laptop or a camera or your phone or whatever. Find a place where you can set it. And you're going to point it at yourself. Make sure that there's enough lighting on your face that you can see yourself clearly and that you're close enough to the camera that you can actually hear yourself. I do have another video where I go into detail on how to build your own self-tape studio, but for the purposes of judging your acting, it's not really necessary to go that in depth. Just find a place where you can set up your camera and it's close enough to hear and see you properly, and then you're going to actually record yourself doing the scene. So I recommend doing the scene at least 2 or 3 times if you can. And then what you're going to do once you've recorded is you're going to go back and watch and pick the scene where you think you did the best job, and then you're going to watch it really, really closely, asking yourself a few questions as you're going through the scene. The first question to ask yourself as you're watching is, are there any unnatural pauses? This is very, very common. A lot of actors who, especially if they're not experienced on camera or they're still working on their technique, they will, when the other character speaks, they'll pause for a second and then they'll kind of like jump back into character. So it's like they're pausing, leaving character for a second, and then they're jumping back in. And that is really distracting. You want to stay in character the whole time. Ideally for this, and for any self-tape submission, you should memorize the dialogue. As an actor, it's your job to memorize, and just keep in mind that if you're submitting and you're not memorizing your lines, that's a huge turnoff for casting directors. So have your lines memorized and then listen to the other character. And if you see any of those unnatural pauses, I definitely recommend that you go back and reshoot it. Now, the second thing we want to look for is anything that's distracting that you might have done with your face, and any time that you're trying to show your emotions instead of hide them. Almost 100% of the time in real life, when people are, doing things or acting, so to speak, they typically hide their emotions unless they're trying to show an emotion to make someone else feel a certain way. But in general, in real life, we usually hide our emotions. So as an actor, it's kind of the tendency that, acting is like showing and revealing emotions. But really, acting is being natural and living and breathing the character. And the way that the character would live and breathe would be that they would try to hide their emotions. So look for unnatural twitches and weird stuff that you might be doing, or any time that you're actively trying to project an emotion outward so that the audience can see it. A simple example would be this. So let's say that you're performing with another character that says something stupid, right? Now, if you're actually having a conversation with this person and they say something stupid, you might look at them just kind of like this, like, right? And not really do much. But a lot of actors will actually do something where they say the other character says something stupid and they go like this. Okay? Now, that was a very subtle difference, but that kind of like this, when you do that eye roll, almost 100% of the time, an eye roll is done because there's a third person in the room, and you want that third person to sort of like, you want to build rapport with them or make them think like, oh, I'm on your side here, and this stupid person just said something crazy, and I want you to know that they said something crazy. So you go and you show this like stupid eye roll thing to be like, look, we're on the same page here. This person is crazy. Now, the reason that a lot of actors who are less experienced do these things is because they're acting for the camera and they're trying to show the audience that they know the character's crazy, right? Or that, they're trying to show that they just thought that the person said something crazy. And in fact, if you're doing a comedy scene, it can actually almost be funnier to not have that eye roll thing. I mean, usually in comedy and slapstick stuff, doing things like that, it can kind of work, but for natural, normal scenes, natural acting and stuff, cutting down on little things like that makes your performance much more realistic and natural. And those are the types of things that casting directors are kind of looking for to determine how experienced are you on camera and how much work are you going to be to get just the way the director wants you to be on set. A casting director obviously wants to bring someone on who's really experienced so that they don't have to provide so much coaching during the actual scene. And when you do little things like the eye roll like that, it kind of tells a casting director that you're gonna be a little bit more complicated to work with, unfortunately. Now, the third and final thing that you should look for, obviously, if you see anything noticeably that looks unnatural, then redo the footage. But the third thing that you want to look for is whether it looks like you're just memorizing and saying the lines, or that you're kind of like waiting for the other person to finish their line so that you can say yours. Okay? Saying lines that are already memorized versus just kind of speaking from the heart or the emotions, whatever you want to call it, there's definitely a noticeable difference there. And listening versus waiting for your turn, there's also a big noticeable difference there. So make sure that when the character is speaking to you, you're actually listening to what they say. That's how well that you should know your lines, that you don't even have to be like thinking while they're saying their line what your next line is so that you say it. You shouldn't be there. That's like 10 steps away from where you need to be. You need to be at a point with whatever lines and whatever your audition is that you've got the lines down so cold that you can really listen and think about what the character is saying, and then you just respond and it comes off completely naturally. So look at your footage for any unnatural ticks and pauses and weird moments, any fake acting like where you do a little eye roll, any moments where it looks like you're just kind of waiting to get your line out and you're not actually listening, and of course any unnatural long pauses. These are the types of things that will really tell a casting director that you might not be right for this big of a project or role. Those are the like subtle differences between a really experienced actor and someone who's kind of still in training. Okay, now that you've recorded your scene and you've done it a few times and you've noticed those little moments that might take someone out of the scene, you should continue re-recording it a few more times until when you watch it, you don't see any of that stuff. And what you're going to want to do at that point is you're going to want to find an acting coach or an acting teacher or an experienced actor, friend. Ideally, one of those three. If you can't get to somebody, and you're not going to be able to have a chance to see anybody for a while, it's fine. You can ask a family member or a friend, but you want to ideally get together with this person in person and sit down together right next to the computer screen or your monitor, and you want to watch this scene. The one that you're most proud of, you want to sit down with the person and actually watch it with them sitting right next to you. I know it can feel awkward, but as an actor, it's your job to not be embarrassed by your performance, but proud of it. Once you're proud of the way that you perform and you know without a shadow of a doubt that you did the best possible job that you could, that confidence kind of leaks out into other areas of your career and you will start to see different results. But basically, you're going to sit down next to this person and you're going to furiously take notes during your scene of anything that you see that might have been distracting or fake or, unnatural. And you're going to also have them be taking their notes. And at the end of it, you're going to compare your notes together and see what things could be improved. Finally, you can go back and re-record your scene a last, 1 or 2 times. And by that point, you'll A, have learned a lot during this process, but B, the scene should be so natural and so strong and powerful that you can definitely use that footage for your reel or pretty much whatever. And when you get to that level and you can see that difference in acting between something that's a little bit off or a little bit of fake or unnaturalness and something that's just completely on point, natural, smooth, all of that, that's the difference. And that's how you know that you're really, really good, that your acting is in fact good enough to start submitting for those much bigger productions or to go out and look for an agent and all of that. That process is probably going to be one of your most useful tools and simple processes that you can kind of follow to judge any piece of material that you're working on. Now, just as one quick side note, if you can't sit down in person with somebody, obviously that's what I recommend because it kind of makes you judge your footage more harshly when you're actually watching it with somebody. But if you can't do that, it's okay, not recommended, but it's okay to send your footage to 3 to 5 people that you know who know acting well and get their feedback. Okay, just ask them to be as harsh as possible and be as nitpicky as possible about anything that they see that you could have done better. And when you get that feedback from those people, you can see what the through lines are, what multiple people said the same thing about, and you'll instantly learn right there what you need to work on for the next